Well, hey guys, welcome to Hope Rescue Podcast. This is Tim and Kimberly Scott, and I'm super excited.
Why?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. But why are you laughing?
I don't know. I can't wait to hear what you say.
I'm super excited because we're talking about marriage today. Marriage.
Yeah, the Princess Bride, famous scene.
Yes.
Marriage.
Yes.
Holy matrimony.
Yes. I got my candle lit here. So happy fall, y'all. Those of you who can see. And it's interesting because we were talking earlier about how marriage is kind of like a light that, a flicker that you have to keep it burning, like a candle or whatever. And how you get those, you guys know where you get, at least I buy mine at the dollar store, the candle lighters, and you're clicking them and you're clicking them and you're shaking them and you click them and it drives you crazy. And then you finally get a little bit of a flame and you...
I always try to light them and you go, shake them.
Yeah, shake it.
Like shake it. Why?
Shake it like a moneymaker. Wait, what?
Yeah, wait a minute. Yeah, they get the fluid going in there.
Shake it like a Polaroid picture. That's
okay. Yeah.
Little throwback there to the early 2000s.
Yes. Whatever.
Anyway, so marriage obviously is like a candle, and you want it to continue to burn, and you want it to burn for a long time. And so we're starting into a mini series on marriage,
and we're calling it Strike the Original Match.
Look at that. See how we tied that in?
Next week we'll talk a little bit more about what it means to strike the original match.
Yes.
But marriage is a ongoing transition, one right after another. You have kids.
Wait a minute, not one marriage right after another, hopefully.
No, I didn't. Wow, did I say that?
One right after another.
I want to say from the outset, it's not from one to... No, there's changes in your life.
Yes.
So, like, you have little kids, you have grown kids, empty nest, you have, that kind of stuff. So we are officially empty nesters for the first time in my life in how long?
47 years you've been raising kids. You raised yours and then you raised mine. And for those of you who don't know, we have been married before and we've shared some of those stories in our earlier podcasts. And we have both experienced incredibly unhealthy marriages. Yeah. And we've been married now for 15 and a half years or so. And yes. And so
15 and a half going on
20. We went to sleep last night talking about the beauty of a healthy marriage. And that doesn't mean a marriage that doesn't have challenges, highs and lows. That's actually what makes it healthy. And that's what we're going to talk about.
I think just a little point here.
Yes.
I think we should sometime do life after divorce.
Oh.
I think we should do that.
Yeah, you mean as a single person?
As a single person, remarrying,
that's a good idea.
That kind of stuff, because there's a lot of misconceptions about marriage, remarriage, divorce, all of that, what the Bible says, all of that.
You were single for 6 years when I met you.
Pretty much.
And I had been single for a couple years.
Yeah.
Like 2.5, something like that. Anyway, we're not talking about divorce today. We're trying to keep you married.
Yeah. So here's what we're going to talk about: the signs of trouble in your marriage. Now, it sounds like a really negative thing, but it's really not. We want you to understand that these signs are for a purpose, for you to make the adjustments necessary. One of the things that I think is important to keep in mind is unresolved problems. So if you don't see the signs that there are problems, I've seen this so many times. Counseling, a couple comes in and the guy goes, I thought everything was fine. Or the woman says, I thought everything was fine. The other person is dying.
Right.
And you need to read the signs, because what happens is unresolved problems breed contempt.
Yes.
And contempt is kind of if I were to describe contempt, it would be kind of this underlying disrespect for the person you're married to.
Yes.
I'm talking about a contempt in marriage. And it's kind of just under the surface. And it comes out every once in a while. If you're having an argument, that disrespect pops up. And that's a sign that there's a problem. But another thing about that can be from anywhere from mild disrespect to really an intense hatred.
Yeah.
So contempt really is not just static. It really is kind of on a scale, I would say. So it's kind of adjusting to where you're at. And if you don't nip it in the bud, you'll have a real big problem with it. It will turn into hatred.
Contempt doesn't move to hatred in one big step.
No.
It actually moves into bitterness
Really
before it
good
turns
point.
into
Yeah.
hatred. So there's a process that happens. But I love that you're using the analogy of signs. I think about, just jumping on a freeway and there's, stop, wrong way, slow
Yield.
down, yield. All of those things are indicating if you want to have your safest journey, you read the signs. And so it doesn't mean in your marriage, if you see a sign that's a red flag, that all is not well and it's doomed. It just means it's time to start having some conversations,
Right.
and to working towards healing.
Yeah.
And before it moves to an unhealthy place.
True. Here's one of the things to keep in mind. In your marriage, I'm going to sneeze.
Uh-oh.
So
This
it's
is where
gonna
I
be-
start talking and
Say something.
I start
boy.
talking about my pumpkin spice candle. And there it goes. I will say this. If you haven't heard my husband sneeze, you haven't heard a sneeze, because he would win the contest for
they
the
have-
most. It's like there's so much power that comes out in
Yeah.
those sneezes.
It's just
It's
glorious.
a spray. We
So,
just watered our backyard.
When I did radio, we had a cough button. So underneath the
Yes.
table or a foot pedal, and you could press it. And I'm going to
Yes.
sneeze one more time.
Oh man, here it goes. So I'm guilty of coughing on air, and Tim is the sneezer. So there we.
This is crazy. this is podcast.
Your face is bright
as
red.
its finest. I'm
Are you
just
better
like-
yet?
You know when you feel like you got to sneeze but you can't?
Oh no!
It's one of those.
Don't look in the light, because then you will. You will sneeze.
Look in the light.
Don't look away from
I'm
the
done.
light.
We have a producer over there going nuts right now. Anyway, hey, we're keeping this. We're
Yes.
not editing.
Yes.
So anyway, what I was going to say is, before I got into a sneeze attack and you started talking about whatever,
A sneeze fest. Yes.
that when you in marriage kiss your spouse, don't make it about you. Don't make it about your spouse. Make it about the us. Because kissing, and I'm going to expand that, when you talk, don't make it about you. Don't make it about your spouse. Make it about the us. When you date, when you go on dates, don't make it about you. Don't make it about your spouse. Make it about us. Everything is about us. When you're married, it's not about your gratification. It's not even about your spouse's gratification. It's about us being gratified. And when you keep that in mind, it will cool the fire of contempt. That's the reason I bring that up, because when I think about us, there are times where I'm being selfish and I don't want to do something, but I'm reminded how much I appreciate us and value us, so I do it. And not always, but
so then it is
sometimes.
about you.
Yeah, it has been many times, as we all know. But
I think that's important, though. There's to strike a balance, because what happens often, and I know in my first marriage, I'll just use myself as an example. I feel like I laid myself on the altar of sacrifice to do whatever it took to make my spouse happy and for him to see value in me and love me. And so I lost myself in that. And it became completely about giving myself to that part of trying to.
So it was about him.
Exactly. But my desire was, when you talk, it wasn't if I do this for him, it's, I'm going to get. It was just that I so needed to feel like I was connected in this marriage, and I kept doing the same thing over and over again, and it never got me anywhere.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just think that there needs to be a balance in that I'm not doing everything just for you. I'm doing this for our relationship.
So here's a good way to find that healthy balance. I think it was last week or the week before, I can't remember. We talked about the difference between mental illness and mental health.
Right.
Mental health is that balance and so forth. If you want mental health or you want marital health, what you're going to have to do is find balance. The way that you find balance is you measure the success of what you give on the impact of the us. So what happened in your relationship was you were losing you, then that means that the us is not working.
Right.
So that's a sign and that's the point we're bringing this up,
Yeah.
a sign is that the us is not healthy. The marriage is not healthy because I'm doing all the giving or I'm doing all the taking, or I resent the fact that I'm doing all the giving.
Yes.
I mean, there are a lot of, especially the generation before mine, our parents' generation, where a lot of women were the givers and
Yes.
the man was the receiver, and the women would do that kind of out of duty. They thought it was a biblical concept. Wasn't, but they thought it was. And the interesting thing about it is a lot of women resented that.
Yes.
And yet they felt like it was unspiritual for them to even voice, hey, there's not an us here.
Yeah.
There's a you, and we're both taking care of your gratification. That's a problem.
Yeah.
So the best way to find out whether you have a healthy marriage and a sign that things are off is when the marriage is not working.
Yes. Yeah.
So let's get into a couple of the signs.
Yeah, so we've
We
got
got a
a list of
bunch.
10. I don't know if we'll hit them all.
Yeah, we'll
but-
see what we can get to. Actually, in the next few weeks, we've got several signs, and then we've got some ways to resolve those
Yes.
signs. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So one of the first signs is that you become, I would say, hypercritical of each other,
Yeah.
and you bicker in unhealthy ways. And I say hypercritical because it is normal to be in a relationship. It's like any kind of a roommate situation when you're with your siblings as a kid, or your own kids or whatever. You bicker with each other. That happens. That's
Are you
human
saying you're
nature.
critical of me?
No, I'm
In any way?
My point is that if you lean into being hypercritical, that's a red flag. That's a sign that this
Yeah.
relationship has gotten unhealthy. We do little bickering.
We do a little bit of bickering. Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Our kids think we do a lot of bickering.
Yeah, I'm guessing probably they do.
but we,
Yes.
It's sometimes it's not good. We do less bickering than we used to.
Yes, as we've gotten our empty nest, we do a lot less bickering.
We're
and so
growing. We're maturing.
I think though that
We bickered right
that-
before this podcast.
That's true. Little stuff. And that's part of having two very strong personalities,
Yeah,
too.
and I think some bickering is okay.
Yeah.
It's just when it becomes
The
insulting
culture
and really painful.
of your
yeah.
home or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So a second sign, kind of move through these. A second sign is that you stop listening to your spouse. That is a big problem, and I don't mean points of distraction. The TV's on or you're scrolling through whatever. I'm not talking about that stuff. What I'm talking about is when you actually don't hear your spouse anymore. You don't hear what's going on in their life. And the only reason you don't listen to someone is because you have contempt, because you disrespect that person. And
Or
it might-
you've been disrespected
yeah,
and
yeah.
shut down.
And it's a really painful thing not to be heard. I've said it a million times on this podcast and preaching, and that is that being heard is so close to being loved. For most people, you can't tell the difference. And when you're not heard, if you're not listening to your spouse, if you stop listening to your wife or your husband, that's a problem, because you're in that marriage to work together. And if you don't hear them, that's going to be a problem.
And I want to qualify that too, because I know for a fact we've raised 7 kids together that in homes, there's a lot of conversation that gets lost in the busyness, in the moment. I think we're both talking about when you're in a crucial conversation with your spouse, you're hearing what they say and you actually are not listening to the point of action. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You're dismissing them and their felt needs and the things that they need, or even making them feel validated as a listener if you're not engaged. Those are the moments. We're not talking about like you're in the car and, hey, I told you da 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 da. You weren't listening. That's not what we're talking about.
I was a couple of weeks ago, I preached on fighting the battles, the right kind of battles. Hosanna Wong wrote this book called How Not to Save the World. If you haven't gotten it, you
So
need to
good.
get it. And it really helps you adjust your site. I could restart that sentence. It helps you to adjust your life to be about mission and to share Christ. Anyway, one of the things that she talked about and I shared was about fighting the right battles.
Oh, that's good.
And when you fight the right battles, like for example, David was getting ready to fight Goliath, and his oldest brother came to him and was diminishing him. He said, "Why aren't you with your tiny little flock, like your worthless little job?" And then he said all these things. David has taken all this in. He goes, "Can I say anything?" And then David just goes, "You know what? This isn't worth the time." Turned around, walked away, and defeated
Slayed Goliath. Yeah.
So the point being that when somebody's not listening to you, it's because they're probably judging you, because they're rejecting you, they're dismissive of your value. So there's a lot of reasons we don't listen to our spouse. But if you don't listen to your spouse, who are you going to listen to?
Right.
That's the most important person in your life, more important than your kids.
And I want to circle back to, though, that the root of that not being heard can sometimes be because the person that is listening has not been heard as well. Yeah. So there's a mutual shutdown. So you can have a spouse that does all the talking and saying, "You're not listening to me, you're not hearing me," and the other person is turned off years before because they were never listened to.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it has to go both ways. It has to go both ways, and it has to be intentional for sure.
Another sign of trouble in marriage is lack of physical intimacy. And I'm not talking just sexual. Of course, that can be a sign as well. But I'm talking about non-sexual affection. You don't hold hands anymore. You don't, hug. We believe in that 21-second hug.
Yeah, you have to explain that.
Yeah, so I don't know where I heard this years ago. I heard somebody said you need to hug your spouse for 21 seconds. Something happens after 10 seconds. It changes and does something to your soul, whatever. I don't even remember the details, but sometimes I'll hug Kimberly and I'll go 18, 19. No, I'll go 18, 19, 20, 21, break. But there's something powerful about touching that person is the most important person in your life. It's important to hug your children. It's important to hug your siblings and your friends and so forth. But there's nothing like hugging your spouse. Yeah. That's your most important person.
Yep.
And
holding hands.
Yeah, holding hands, all of that.
Arm in arm.
Yeah.
Yep. Just the simple things. Scratching someone's back. Those are all ways that are not necessarily sexual, but show affection, and it's a nonverbal physical love language. Yeah, which is powerful, and obviously the sexual is as important as well. Right. And that's a red flag if you're not sexually intimate with your spouse. Another red flag or sign is that you keep arguing about the same things. Now, see, that's a sensitive one too, because most couples do kind of go around and around about the same things.
And it's because you have pet peeves.
Right.
And your pet peeves, which means you're weak-minded, but I have pet peeves. I have some serious pet peeves. My kids know my pet peeves. And sometimes I even breach my pet peeve by doing the same thing. Here's my biggest pet peeve: affirming strongly that which you don't know. It drives me crazy when people do that. And every once in a while I'll do it. But anyway, the point being that because you have certain things that are your values. Yeah. So when those values are not being, respected or whatever, you kind of go there. Yeah. And I think that's a really common problem to camp on the same thing over and over again.
And I think what happens is you reach a point of non-negotiation, and so it's not resolved, and so you keep circling back to it, And so the goal would be to come to the table and say, what can we do to have a breakthrough to make you feel respected, whatever, loved, and to also satisfy my end of it and come up with an agreement on that, because otherwise if your the culture of your home is arguing, debate, and conflict, you're doomed.
Yeah. So somebody says, "Hey, we don't argue at all, so we're good, right?"
You're doomed.
Yeah. What's the next one?
The next one is that if you don't fight at all, right?
Yeah. So if you argue, you got a problem. If you don't argue, you're in trouble either way. No,
the extremes.
A relationship is just that. It's a negotiation between two people, and it's going to create conflict. And if you don't argue, then listen to this: someone is not giving their perspective.
That's right.
Somebody's stuffing their view.
That's right.
And that's a real problem.
Yeah.
We live in a day where cancel culture is really common. Conservatives want to cancel liberals, and liberals want to cancel conservatives, and Republicans and Democrats want to cancel each other. And the real problem is we need to have dialogue. There used to be a time where we had dialogue.
Yes, right.
But because we don't respect and we're polarized, that's when things really get. You get that in marriage?
Yeah.
That polarization.
Disunity
Yeah.
and separation is where
Yeah.
that leads to separation of your hearts and your spirits from each other. But when you do argue and fight, you need to learn to fight fair and learn to disagree and still respect and love each other.
Yeah.
That's the key.
A couple of things about fighting fair that's probably important for us to say is, one is you don't go after things that are very sensitive and unmanageable and uncorrectable.
So give me an example.
Like somebody's appearance. Somebody, you don't like the way somebody looks. Like, what are you going to do about that?
Right.
There's nothing you can do about that.
Right.
You got an ugly face, you got an ugly face, or you're too tall or you're too short or whatever. Like, stay away from that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
That is really not fighting fair. A fair fight would be when you say this is how I feel.
Right.
And then you're not judging that person. You're saying, this is the impact that's having on me. And you're really good at that. And I'm getting better. I'm learning because I'm a broad brush kind of guy. But when you respect somebody, you're going to probably handle it better.
Yeah.
So let me give a couple more. Uneven distribution of responsibility. So when one person is carrying the load, I was raised in a family where men did not do certain chores. In our family, you cook because I'm not good at it.
You're pretty
or
good
at least
cook.
I don't try. But anyway, like I like cleaning. I like doing the dishes and stuff like that. We share that. You do it more than I do, I'm guessing.
Oh, you're my go-to guy.
Yeah. So we share the load, and when you don't share the load, it creates distance with your spouse. Another thing is, we actually already hit that one. So let's go to number 8.
It's definitely a warning sign when you don't enjoy each other's company, when you are basically tolerating each other's company. Here's your sign.
Yeah. A couple came in years ago. I was just a young pastor. I was probably 23. And this couple came in that were in their 50s. A 20-something-year-old guy counseling somebody in their 50s. And they walked in, and I remember those early days of counseling. I call it counseling. It was, just give some biblical advice and so forth. But I was way in over my head. But I remember them saying, we walk down the hall and we do everything in our power to not have to touch when we go by each other.
Wow.
And I said, wow. So there's a lot of anger towards each other. And they said, yeah. And I said, do you guys sleep in the same bed? No, we sleep in separate beds. So you guys are kind of like
roommates,
discontent roommates. Exactly. And I said, what do you want? Do you want to be married? And they both said, we don't think so. I said, well, I don't know that there's much I can do if you don't want to be married. But I can tell you this, that if you want to be married, you have to change that.
Yeah.
That is crucial. You're going to have to learn to go, what does she need? What does he need? You're going to have to ask yourself that question. What can I do today to make her feel good about herself and make her feel good about us?
We have to physically and mentally move towards each other, just the opposite of what's happening in the hallways.
Slowly, not too fast.
Yeah.
And I actually gave them exercises. I didn't know what I was doing, but I did the best I could. I said, look, I want you to do this. I want you to try for this next week.
Yeah.
I want both of you every day to think of one thing you can do to reach the heart of your spouse.
That's good.
And they started doing that. And then I got them into good counseling, and, somebody was old enough to know what they were talking about, but they're still married to this day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's key just across the board is that in marriage, you have to be intentional to make moves towards one another.
Yeah.
I know for us, we went through a lot of big things this last year.
Yeah, we did.
And have finally come to having an empty nest. And my mom had been living with us after my dad passed for many months. And she recently moved right down the street, and it's been a joy to have her that close. But so we haven't really ever had a home to ourselves.
Yeah.
And during the difficulties of this last year, in recent months anyway, we realized that nobody will make us a priority except for us.
Right.
And so as busy as our schedules were and as difficult as it was, for me, I was caring for my mom, and for you, you're involved in a lot of different things. We decided we have to have a date once a week to reconnect, because seeing each other in front of the TV
just turned into
wasn't
2 or 3 a week now.
Now but really that's what kept us hanging on, and it was our oxygen to our relationship, and gave us an opportunity to process. And then what we started doing was, when we would go on our dates, we would stop talking about the stresses that we have in life, but actually just making it about you and me, which was a huge turn. Yeah.
Well, here, let's kind of close it off with some ways to strike the original match, and we'll explain that metaphor next week. But first one is, explain to your spouse what you need and what you want, not what they are doing wrong. Mm-hmm. So if you say, if you would do this, I'd feel better about our marriage. What you should say is, what I need is, I really want to be close to you, or I want to be safe. And a woman might say to her husband, I feel like every time I'm vulnerable, you use that against me. So the best way to say that is to say, I'm afraid to share because I'm afraid that might come up again. And just kind of soften it a little bit, because anybody that's intuitive enough, if they don't get it, then you're probably going to have to get to a counselor. But I think that's really important. The second thing is, ask a question of about your spouse's happiness. Ask, when's the last time you asked your husband or your wife, what makes you happy? What can I do to make you happy? And what can we do that would make you happy? And then a different, really close to that is, what hurts you?
Yes.
When I say this, does that hurt you? When find out what makes them happy, what hurts.
And we have to do this quickly, but a segue to that would be to give sympathy and actually enter into their pain if they're struggling. And then next, it would be to affirm their feelings in that moment.
So now their feelings.
Right, to affirm it, and then welcome your spouse into your heart and strengths and fears, and kind of that lights on, windows open thing with and so that you can provide safety for them, and they can provide safety for you to expose the deep places of your own heart.
There is nothing more powerful than this last one I want to share, and that is to tell your spouse the good things about them.
Yeah.
There is nothing more power. The word encourage means to instill courage. And the point that I want you to catch is, when you tell your husband or your wife, you are awesome at this, it just, as Kimberly says, it always fills my cup, my love cup. It makes me full, and I feel like I'm in this, and it makes them want to have the courage to go on and fix whatever's broken and to revel in those things that are good. Well, thanks for listening. Next week, we're going to get into some more signs and what you can do about them. Thanks for listening to Hope Rescue Podcast. Have a great week. Invite a friend to come next week.